So with this card being headlined by Mighty Mouse Johnson versus Wilson Hayes, you've also got the co-main between Rose Namajunas and Michelle Waterson, and the feature bout with Jacare Souza and Robert Whitaker. There are a lot of other really big names scattered throughout this card that are really interesting and worth watching. So the other fight on the main card is going to be Jeremy Stevens, who is ranked number 5 at featherweight right now against Renato Moicano. Renato is 10-0-1, so he's technically an undefeated fighter coming in, making his debut against a guy in Jeremy Stevens who's no picnic. So I don't know much about Renato, but you have to figure that a guy like Stevens is not the kind of guy you want to fight in your UFC debut, and you have to figure that's going to favor him big time. As far as the Fox prelims go, the first fight on that card is going to be between Alexander Volkov, who is ranked number 11 at heavyweight, versus Roy Nelson, who is currently outside of the top 15. You'd have to figure this is going to be a big chance for Nelson to work his way back in there. At this point, his game really hasn't evolved a whole ton, but even still, it's really tough to deal with a guy who isn't easy to take down, huge right hand, and pretty competent striker. For Volkov, it's going to be tough for him to implement his game. You'd have to figure Nelson is going to have a good opportunity here to work his way back into the top 15 with a win. The next fight on the card is Patrick Williams versus Tom Duquesne or Duquesnoy. Don't know a whole ton about either of these guys, but again, can't be upset with a fight like this. Both of these guys have pretty good records. You've also got Bobby Green versus Rashid Magomedov. Bobby Green had worked his way towards the top 10 of the lightweight division and sort of faded out. I believe there were some injury issues, but also some personal issues too. So it's good to see him back. Good to see him getting a little bit more activity. Magomedov is a really strong wrestler out of Russia, so for Green it'll be interesting to see if he can keep this fight standing, and if so, what he can do on his feet. If not, it might just be your typical Magomedov fight where he takes a guy down, beats him up for 3 rounds, and gets his hand raised at the end of the night. And then the last card on the main card, or the last fight on the Fox prelims, or I guess it's actually the first one, but I'm going from main event to first prelim. So I guess the first one on that is a battle between 2 top-ranked, top 15 flyweights, and Louis Smolka, who previously, before his fight with Ray Borg, was being looked at as a guy who was getting ready to be the next challenge for Mighty Mouse Johnson. He lost that fight. Actually, it was the fight with Brandon Moreno prior to that. So he lost the fight to Brandon Moreno, and then he also fought Ray Borg, lost that fight as well. Borg came in overweight for that fight, but again, Borg's just constant attack, and his wrestling was just too much for Smolka to deal with. He'll be fighting Tim Elliott, who, of course, won the Ultimate Fighter, came in against Mighty Mouse Johnson, nearly caught him in a couple of chokes in the first round, but ended up losing that fight, but still looked really good in the process. So where the rankings are at now, Smolka's ranked number 12, Elliott's ranked number 9. As far as I think this fight's going to go, I didn't like what I saw from Smolka in his last fight. It sounds like he even kind of admitted that he just kind of drank a lot and really wasn't training as hard. You'd have to figure that after his loss to Borg, that probably didn't change a whole lot. Elliott's coming in rejuvenated. Now, again, Elliott didn't exactly have a great record in his first stint in the UFC. He's gotten better, but it's not like he's just way better than he used to be. His game is what it is. It's tough to deal with. But for Smolka, I just don't see, based on his last performances, how he's going to do a whole lot better against Elliott. So this seems like a good fight for Elliott to get back on the winning track and beat a top 15 flyweight in the UFC and sort of work his way back into the division, see where he fits in now that he's had his title shot, see if he can work his way back to a title shot, or see if he's just going to kind of hover on the top 8, top 5, maybe even closer than that. And then on the Fight Pass prelims, the Fight Pass prelim main event is Devin Clark versus Jake Collier. There's also a very interesting fight, in my opinion, in Anthony Smith versus Andrew Sanchez. Sanchez has a pretty good college wrestling background. Also, I believe he's a purple belt champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His Jiu-Jitsu game, though, is primarily based on getting guys down and then working from the top and controlling. So against a guy like Anthony Smith, who's a really good wrestler in his own right, it'll be interesting to see if Sanchez is actually able to get the fight to the ground. If he's not, then he's going to be forced into a stand-up battle, which could be interesting to see what he can do against a guy like Smith. If he is able to get a guy like Smith, who's a really good wrestler, down, how well is he able to control him and keep him down? Is the fact that Smith has more of a wrestling background going to hurt him, and that Sanchez is going to have more opportunities to pass his guard? A lot of questions to be answered here, and that's why I'm interested in seeing it. Speaking of which, another very interesting fight on the Fight Pass prelims. Kind of surprising that both of these guys are going to be stuck on Fight Pass for this card. Aljamain Sterling, who right now is ranked number 8 at bantamweight, against Augusto Tonquinho Mendes. Tonquinho, of course, is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. Him and Cabrinha kind of go back and forth at times. His only loss in the UFC was to Cody Garbrandt. It was by knockout. Garbrandt had dropped him, and as Garbrandt was getting ready to kind of jump in his guard, the ref stepped in the way. I figured at that point anyway, as rocked as he was, Cody probably finishes that fight, but you would have liked to have seen Garbrandt have to deal with his grappling. But speaking of which, Aljamain Sterling, a lot of what has made him so tough is he's not exactly the best striker, but he has very good wrestling. He's got a really funky jiu-jitsu style, but he's not your typical wrestler that's going to take you down and just kind of hold you down. He does a lot of guard passing. He looks for a lot of submissions, but if he tries that against Tonkinho, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. This is not the fight for Aljamain Sterling to do what Aljamain Sterling typically does, and for that reason, this could either be really bad in that you have two guys who don't exactly prefer to strike that are going to end up striking, because you wouldn't figure that Tonkinho is going to be able to take Aljo down. If he is, Aljo probably gets back up pretty quickly. Aljo is not going to want to take Tonkinho down, so this could potentially be a really bad striking match, or it could be a really interesting MMA fight where they do have some good striking exchanges. Maybe there are some times where Tonkinho is able to drag Aljo down. Maybe Aljo feels confident enough to drag Tonkinho down. And if this fight ever does hit the mat, it's going to be extremely interesting to see what happens once it gets there. But very interesting for Aljo because he's coming off a couple of losses, and this isn't exactly an easy fight for him to pick up a win. And you'd figure, ideally for him, you put him against a guy who he can take down and dominate. And this is not the guy in Tonkinho Mendes. Other two fights on the card, you've got Zach Cummings versus Nathan Coy. Cummings always a tough guy. He's kind of a guy who hovers around the top 20, top 25, but hasn't really worked his way in. If he gets a win here, he's probably still a couple fights away from working his way into a bigger fight, but again, it's a good one for him to get into. And then the final fight the first fight on the card is Ashley Evans-Smith versus Ketlin Vieira. Evans-Smith, of course, a top 15 fighter, and it'll be interesting to see what she does from here. This is at 135. Winner probably doesn't go too far up in the standings. You figure if Evans-Smith gets the win, then she might get a bout against a top 10 fighter afterwards, but we don't know a whole ton about Vieira. She's undefeated right now at 7-0, so a good opportunity for her, but really a good opportunity for her to showcase herself. Evans-Smith hasn't really shown to be someone who's likely to contend for the title anytime in the future, but who knows? She's still young in career. Technically, her record's 5-1, so there's a lot more that she can do. She's got plenty of time to learn, and we'll kind of see how this fight plays out.